We have breaking news here on Steelers Talk as the Pittsburgh Steelers are hiring Vikings tight ends coach and pass game coordinator Brian Angelico to be their next offensive coordinator under new head coach Mike McCarthy. On today's show, I'm going to be breaking down everything you guys need to know about Angelico and why I like this hire for the black and gold. But before we get into the content today, this is why you subscribe to the channel, guys. Breaking news coverage every time the Steelers make a big move. We now have the big three, so to speak, in the coaching staff with Mike McCarthy as head coach, Brian Angelico at offensive coordinator, and then Patrick Graham at defensive coordinator. So now the search for, the next starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers can officially begin. Free agency talk, draft stuff. We're going to have it all for you guys right here on the channel. So every time Omar Khan makes a trade, every time they make a signing, every time they make a draft pick, we're going to have you covered with content for you guys for free here on the channel. So join the over 100,000 Yinzers already subscribed to Steelers Talk by clicking that subscribe button today. All right, so now when it comes to this hire, Brian Angelico, according to the Pat McAfee Show Steelers correspondent Mark Caboli, he says that Angelico is actually Pittsburgh's number one choice for the offensive coordinator position. There was some reports out there that the Steelers wanted Scott Tolzien, and that Tolzien ended up rejecting the Pittsburgh Steelers and turning down the job. Apparently that wasn't the case. Apparently it was the Steelers that were enamored with Angelico and his plan for the Steelers offense, and ended up passing up on Tolzien to hire this guy. And Angelico, this will be the first time that he has been an offensive coordinator in his 14-year NFL coaching career. He has been a tight ends coach with a number of different spots, including Mike McCarthy's Green Bay Packers. And he's 53 years old, so he's certainly not a young buck, but he's somebody that's coming in here that's never called plays in the National Football League before, but he was the pass game coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings under Kevin O'Connell. And since 2022, when he took over that job, that's been one of the better passing offenses in the National Football League outside of last year where J.J. McCarthy was just terrible. But you guys can take a look at Angelico's coaching history. He actually started his D1 coaching career with the Pitt Panthers, where he spent a half decade in Pittsburgh. Then he went to Rodgers for a year, a couple years in Tampa Bay and Cleveland. Then he joins Mike McCarthy's staff in Green Bay for 3 seasons. Then McCarthy gets fired. He ends up moving on to Washington and Carolina. Then he lands with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, and he was there from 2022 to 2025. Now, to be absolutely clear about what his role is going to be here, guys, Angelico will not be calling the plays. It will be head coach Mike McCarthy calling the plays, and that might honestly be one of the main reasons why Tolzien didn't get the job. Was I'm sure he probably wanted to call plays and wanted a similar setup to what McCarthy had with Kellen Moore there in Dallas before, of course, McCarthy let go of Kellen Moore and took over play calling duties towards the end of his tenure there with the Cowboys. And McCarthy's on record saying he's never given up offensive play calling duties ever again. And obviously Angelico was more than willing to take this job, knowing that he will not call plays with the Pittsburgh Steelers, or at least not to start his tenure with the Steelers as the OC. But he brings some really nice Kevin O'Connell influences to our offense. And, I really like the fact that this guy, helped Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell come up with some of the best passing concepts and passing offenses that we've seen in the NFL over the last half decade, especially when it comes to the under center play action game. Minnesota is well known for their creative play action concepts and just general drop back passing concepts and getting the most out of guys like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, but also lower level names like KJ Osborne and Jalen Naylor, who, by the way, is a free agent coming up here this spring. So, I think that influence being injected into the Mike McCarthy offense, which very regularly is inside the top 10, top 5, and even sometimes gets to be the number 1 offense in the National Football League. I do think that Angelico's presence and, what he can provide to this passing offense in particular is a welcome sight for Steelers fans out there, even though he's not the young, quote-unquote, up-and-coming mind a lot of Steelers fans were hoping for, specifically with Scott Tolzien. So coming up here, my grade for this hire, I'll be revealing what I think about this hire, and then also something that I think Angelico is going to bring to the table that a lot of Steelers fans are going to love. But before we get into the rest of this breaking news edition of Steelers Talk, check out our website today where you guys can get a Steelers rope hat on our website right now. Go chatsports.com/pitrope. Kind of similar to the channel hats that we have here, with just a little bit of a different look. It doesn't have the channel on there, but it does have Pittsburgh Steelers on there. So if you guys want a new hat to ring in the new era of of Steelers football here with Mike McCarthy as our new head coach. You guys can go chatsports.com/pitrope to get your hat today. Part of the proceeds do go back to us here at Chat Sports and here at Steelers Talk. So that link is down there in the comments and description of today's show. So if you click that link, make a purchase, you help out the channel, and you get a new hat. Get to kill two birds with one stone there. So if you guys want a new Steelers hat, this is a great opportunity to do so right now when you go chatsports.com/pitrope. Now, my grade for Brian Angelico as the next offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers is a B+. Now, I don't want to give it an A necessarily because he doesn't have a quarterback development background, and that's really going to be a big part of this job and a big part of the next regime. I think I probably, if I had to pick between Scott Tolzien and Angelico, I probably would have chosen Tolzien, if I'm being completely honest with you, because of his quarterback development background. But Angelico, I think is a perfectly good hire. And what this hire really tells me, guys, is that Mike McCarthy is going to really want to feature the tight ends in this group here with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth, bringing in a big name tight end coach and one of the most respected tight end coaches in the league in Angelico that also can bring some Kevin O'Connell influences to this passing attack. I think is a really good thing and a very good fit for the Steelers personnel that we have here on the roster currently. And I do think that Mike McCarthy is going to use Pat Freiermuth in the right way. I mean, we saw last year in an Arthur Smith classic, using a bad football player above a good football player, with Jonnu Smith getting more snaps than Pat Freiermuth last year somehow. Just absolutely ridiculous. And obviously, Muth was just not utilized enough in this passing offense last year in a system where you only had one legitimate receiving threat in DK Metcalf, and Muth was still castigated behind Jonnu and Darnell. And, I think Darnell's a good player, but, with McCarthy's use of option routes from the slot receiver and specifically from tight ends, I mean, Dalton Schultz turned into a really, really good player in this Mike McCarthy style of offense with Dak Prescott throwing him the football. And we already know Aaron Rodgers and Pat Freiermuth have an awesome connection. So if Rodgers comes back next year, which does seem to be the most likely scenario at the quarterback position, we could be looking at maybe a career year for Pat Freiermuth, and he can finally make that ascent to the top 10, maybe even top 5 receiving tight ends in the National Football League that we've been waiting for him or from him for a very long time. But that doesn't mean that Mount Washington is going to be going anywhere, guys. I expect DW to probably get an extension just because he is such an X factor with his size, with his athleticism. The advantage that he provides as a run blocker is essentially a 6th offensive lineman, but also being a guy that is so good after the catch, has solid hands. He's somebody that provides the Steelers offense a big advantage. And if you utilize these two tight ends the proper way, and I do believe Mike McCarthy's going to use these guys in the proper way, you could really have, one of the more unique offenses in the National Football League heading into 2026 and beyond with these two guys leading the way and bringing in one of the better tight ends coaches in the league here in Angelico to be your offensive coordinator and tight ends coach. Just, raises the ceiling on these guys even more as far as I'm concerned. And yes, if you are wondering, Angelico does have a Rodgers connection. Obviously, he was with Rodgers when they were both in Green Bay from 2016 to 2018. So, what is the extent of their relationship? I'm not too sure, but obviously, Mike McCarthy feels like Angelico can work well with Aaron Rodgers because McCarthy has said it himself. The plan is to bring back Aaron Rodgers for another season here in Pittsburgh. So I'm guessing he wouldn't hire anyone to be the OC working with them every single day if he felt like it was going to be an issue. So I do think, not only the Pittsburgh connection, but also the Rodgers connection, the McCarthy connection, just everything makes sense here for Brian Angelico as the next offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that this is a pretty damn good hire. And I think McCarthy's assembled a pretty darn good staff here in Pittsburgh that I'm pretty excited to see, see what they can do here in 2026 and beyond. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. Will we have an answer from Aaron Rodgers, whether or not he'll play or not, by the end of February? Okay, free agency starts, about a quarter of the way through March. Let me know if you think we'll have an answer from Rodgers by the end of the month. Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section, and that'll be it for today's breaking news edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. We're going to be continuing to get you guys news and rumors coverage when it comes to free agency, trades, the draft, all off-season long as Mike McCarthy and his new coaching staff build out their roster for the 2026 season. That'll be it for me today, guys. I'll see you guys next time, and until then, here we go, Steelers.